Toms have always kind of been a weak point for me. We're just going to kind of solo this section here. You can see I've got some Tom 1, Tom 2 hits, and then Tom 3 and 4 Tom 3 hits here. 4 I have to go all the way back to here. So let's start with Tom 1. Let's listen to it. It's kind of really quick successions there. Let's see what this one sounds like. There's a little more there, so let's start there. This plugin setup is very similar across all 4 toms, and there's a reason for that. I like to keep them a little uniform. The things that I change across each tom are the amount of high end that I push out, where the high pass filter is, usually the compression amount, and definitely where the low end boost is. I don't want to push the extreme low end out of a small rack tom. I would rather push a more heavy low end out of a floor tom. So let's listen to what the channel strip does for this tom right now. It's cutting a good bit out. We've got a 6K shelf at 2 dB. I'm not doing anything on this band. We're cutting out 289, 4 dB, kind of tight Q. And then I'm boosting 125, which is just kind of where I felt the fundamental of this was. Let's listen to it. Let's boost it up and listen to how it sounds. Sounds pretty close to me. You could see the compressor was getting a little bit of gain reduction on there. I am reducing a little bit of the output of this just because I am going to go into the JST clip afterwards, which is 3 lights, not reducing any volume. So it's actually going to be pushing a lot and clipping the signal, which helps it stand out in the mix. So I'm gonna get used to seeing these settings on the next couple. So on to Tom 2, very similar setup. I guess I'm not actually doing any high pass on this one. 6K bell, 3 dB, nothing here. 289, not a big reduction. This one's being boosted at 112. You can see the release is a little bit longer here on this one. So let's listen to this tom without this first. So with the 112 bell here, let's listen to that, boost it up. It gets a little exaggerated once you get far up there, but it sounds about close to where it is. And the main reason I use these channel strip plugins is because they make you mix with your ears, not your eyes. When you use a plugin like FabFilter Pro Q, you have a whole frequency spectrum and these wide bells in front of you, and you sometimes start seeing peaks and you think you need to remove them. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes the best way to do it is to really just listen. You really should not be mixing with your eyes all the time. I'm not saying to not use your eyes, but you should try to use your ears more, because you're not going to be listening with your eyes when you're in your car or when you hand this off to a client or anything like that. Your ears are what determines everything. So always, I tend to use these with mixing drums because they have the console feel, so you get this that vibe from them. I really don't like that word, but you do get it from it because it adds a little bit of something with this THD, the distortion, that you don't get with a Pro Q style EQ. Now I say that, and I have Pro Q on my bus here, and we're going to go over that shortly. So again, Tom 2 with the just channel strip. Again, I have JST clip doing the same thing, no reduction on the trim, 3 lights. tom 1 and 2 together. So let's move on to tom 3. We're going to hear the same thing here. I gotta say, these floor toms are usually my weak point, getting them to sound the way I want. So I did my best on this one. As you can see, I am pushing a big shelf at almost 9 dB shelf at 6K. None on this band. Another 290 reduction, tight Q 3.7 dB. 97 for the frequency here, just a little bit pushed up. Let's listen to what this does. You can hear it's really pushing a lot of high end out because I want to be able to hear it within the mix. So once again, JST clip, same settings. They all have the same settings on this plugin. Tom 2 and 3 together. It's maybe a little bit much on that high end there. It sounded all right to me. You can obviously reduce that. Let's see how it sounds reduced. I guess it does sound a little better. Kind of brings it in line with the other one. So tom 4, I've only got some individual hits here. It's only used a couple times throughout the song, these main riffs. So let's listen to just tom 4. It's going to sound nice and big and loaded with low end. This one has a high shelf at 3K because it's a large drum, so I wanted to pull out more of the upper mids and the top end. This one has a 400 hertz dip instead of the 290. This shelf right here probably isn't right. I probably just copy pasted this from the other one. So let's see what's going on here. And I am using the gate on this one because I didn't want it to sustain out as long as it was. If you listen, it's kind of sustaining a little bit long. You might need to be on headphones to hear that, but the low end sustains out pretty far. So when I turn this on, it's going to cut off a lot sooner. Probably a little too soon. So you can see here that 97 probably needs to be reduced. So let's see where that would sound better. I think that 75 probably sounds a little better right there. Let's drop this back down. I think that sounds better. Let's listen to it with this this little tom fill here, how it sounds. So let's listen to that with the kick and snare added in there to this part. With toms, like I said, it's mostly these individual mics for me. So let's go onto the bus for the toms too, which does have a little bit of extra EQ. This is where I'm doing my main mid EQ dips. I've got this 44 hertz high pass on, and then I'm dropping out a bit of these mid-range, and you're going to notice these toms sound a little bit different once I do that. And then the clipper once again. This one is reducing a good bit of the gain because it pushes all of the drums in this channel up quite a bit. It kind of just brings them back in line, keeps everything sounding similar without pushing the gain too much. It clips them, but doesn't push them. So here's the kick, snare, and toms again. So now that we've got that done, it's time to move on to cymbals, where we're going to start bringing the mix together in a very different way. So for the cymbals, we're going to go back to this section, this mid section here, because I've got a good bit of everything going. You can see there's a little ride hit here. There's a lot of hi-hats. So we're going to start with the hats. Again, BX console. Let's listen to the hats solo and then turn this on. Not really doing a lot here. I'm reducing a little bit of 6K to reduce some of the sizzle. I am boosting a little bit of 9K to bring some of it back. And then there's a little bit of that THD here, really reducing with the high pass. Let's listen to what that does. You might need to be on headphones, but there's some low-end information in there that I wanted gone because hi-hats don't need any of that. They need a little bit of mid-range and they need their high range to cut through, which is where I know I said about using those channel strips for drums, but with cymbals, I do tend to like graphic EQs like this. With cymbals, I do like to see the range that I'm removing because they do have a lot of ringing frequencies, and sometimes just sweeping around on those channel strips can be difficult, and also they can't really get as tight with the Q as one of these EQs. I'm not really doing anything super tight here, but let's listen to what this EQ does. You can tell this 5K right here is reducing a ringing node. Just listen to it. Reducing that really helps with the overall upper end of the mix and keeping it together, keeping it from being too harsh for the listener. This 490 right here is kind of a range in the cymbals that always bugs me and helps to clear up room for the rest of the drums. Here's what it sounds like with it boosted up a little bit. So hi-hats, not a lot going on there. Just a little bit of EQ, no compression, a little bit of distortion. Let's move on to ride. There's a little section of ride right here. Let's listen to that. I don't do a lot on my rides. I reduce some mid-range and I filter them out a little bit. Actually didn't realize I had that gate going on there when I shouldn't have. But what I'm doing here is I'm removing some of that 490 because, again, cymbals don't need it. I'm filtering up to 350. We'll go ahead and listen to that. Just if there's some information there we don't need, it's gone now. Now onto the one that I have labeled MISC. This is a mixture of the splash, stack cymbal, China spot mic, any kind of extra cymbals that aren't the ride or the hi-hats that I would like to control on their own. This is a decent section to check out right here. So the first one is a splash into what sounds, I think, the trash cymbal or stack, and then I believe it's a bit of China. So let's listen to what's going on here. I only have one plugin on this channel. I am using the automation here to reduce some of this in the spots so the overhead takes the majority of it. This is just kind of something I'll do occasionally when there's certain cymbals. Like here, I push this one up a little bit, but I bring it back down over here. Automation's super important with anything. I'm not doing a whole lot on this one, but I wanted to, reduce some things to let other things through. And then here, because this cymbal, I really wanted a little bit more force in this section, just so we could hear that cymbal cut through a little harder against the guitars. So let's listen to this without any processing. So on this one, I'm reducing the high pass 126, just cut out low end. I am boosting a little bit of highs, 8K at 2.3, a little bit of 3K, up push 1.6, reducing some 475 by about 4.5 dB. I'm not using any of the dynamics, no compression or gating, so let's listen to what that does. I don't want to do a lot to this channel because the main overhead channel here is going to be the majority of what is going on with the cymbals. This is also where we're going to start hearing more of the other drums because I don't cut them out of the overheads. I just reduce their level in the mixer. So onto just the main overheads where we're going to hear a lot of what's going on here. But I'm actually going to bring this back out some so we can get an idea of everything. Just kind of play this whole section here. You can see there's, because it's going to have all these other cymbals involved and the drums. So overheads. Again, starting with the channel strip, reducing a lot of the low end here because you can hear a little bit of the kick and snare, and I do want to reduce them in there, but I don't want to make them completely disappear. Just kind of to help with the feel of it being a drum kit in a room. I'm, reducing 329 hertz, which is a lot of information, but enough to allow the cymbals to be the main thing that's heard on this channel. I am high passing a little bit, or low passing rather, just because I wanted to control that high end. I'm not boosting anything on the shelf. I'm not cutting anything here. I am cutting a little bit at 8K or 800 hertz, 824. Kind of a mid EQ on it, mostly just because that range is not very nice in cymbals. So let's listen. I mean, that really does remove the kick from it substantially. But like I said before, I mostly wanted my main kick sound to be the direct mics. So let's listen to what this cut right here, the main thing this EQ is here for, along with not boosting anything up. So let's listen to this and hear what that does and why I'm reducing 3 dB. Just kind of brings it together, brings the cymbals forward while the drums kind of get pushed back a little bit, and also reduces some of the honkiness in the cymbals, that kind of mid-range mud that will clash heavily with the guitars and vocals. I am doing a little bit more EQ with a visual EQ here, but not much. I'm reducing some of this. It's a little weird notch there at about 3.6, 3.8. So let's listen to what that's doing. That sound right there is what makes cymbals harsh. That 3.6, 3.8 range, usually just in the 3K range, there's this nastiness to cymbals that once you dip it out, but just enough, it starts to make it where they don't become too harsh, they don't hurt your ears, but they also don't get washy. They don't just sound like a white noise. They still have their clarity, they still have their shine, but they don't sound just ear piercing. To me, that 3K range, 3 to 4K range, is one of the worst when it comes to cymbals. I think people really need to pay attention to when they are mixing any kind of drums, programmed or not. Last thing on there is the famous L1. I mainly put this here to reduce the snare in the overheads, not to actually do anything else. You see they're both even. I don't think it's really doing much here. I kind of just left it to keep the cymbals in place. Let's see. I guess there is a little tiny bit of reduction being done on the toms and some of the snare hits, but not a lot. Just a tiny little bit, kind of keeping everything in place. So that's the main overheads. Let's listen to all these together now as one before we add in the rooms. Hear that it's really starting to come together with that. If I go ahead and add in the rest of the drums minus the rooms, let's hear what it sounds like all together in this section. Now, once I add in those rooms, this is really going to come together. So let's go ahead and solo that and listen to the most important part of this entire drum mix, the room mics. Like I said before, I reduced a lot of the cymbals in the rooms, so the majority of the cymbals are coming from the spots and the overheads. So this is mostly going to be kick, snare, and toms. And the reason for that is because, like I said, it's a very explosive room. I wanted to capitalize on that and use it to pull the whole kit together and give you that full drum sound that sounds finished like a drum kit in a room, but that was mixed for an album. So let's listen to just the rooms before any processing. And you can even see the main transient you're hearing on this is the snare, and that's total conscious decision. You could run all of your mics full blast on the room and blend it in how you want, like an actual drum kit in a room. But given the opportunity with these drum programs, I like to use what's there to produce the sound that I want, since it's just available to me. But the whole process is making it sound like drums, but cleaner, essentially. So the first one, of course, is the channel strip. Now this one, I am using the compressor here in fast mode with a little bit slower attack, or release rather. I'm running the ratio double what I normally do at 8.8 to 1. The high pass is at 330. Low pass is at 5.6K. That's because the little bit of the cymbals that are there and a little bit of that tom and snare high end, I just want to control it. Not boosting anything on these. I am reducing a little bit of 296, about 4 dB at a relatively mid Q. So let's listen to what this does. This is going to bring the room out. It's going to push a lot of things forward. Now, I'm not crushing the room. I don't really care for crushed drum rooms. Some people do, personal preference, but let's listen to what this does. You can hear it's kind of creating a little bit of movement. You can really tell that that high pass is doing a lot to the sound. It's almost completely removing the kick. It's almost completely removing the toms and mainly leaving you with the snare. But listen. The toms are still there, but you're mostly getting a little bit of the attack. And again, that's conscious decision. I did reverse the polarity here, which is important To me, it sounded a little better. I think it was mostly because I had run the high pass up so far, which is something you really need to be careful of with drums, is running your high passes will cause your polarity on some of these to change, because it does change the amplitude of what's being played. So let's just see what the polarity switch does here. You'll hear it a little better when everything is in place. So let's go ahead and add in the rest of the drums, so you'll hear the full sound of the drum mix as it is now, and then we'll mess with this polarity. So this is with the rooms now. You're gonna hear the whole kit come together. I guess it kind of brings out a little bit more low end the other way. I kind of wanted it to bring out more high end because there is a lot of low end in the snare already. The other thing I have on this channel is good old Sound Toys Decapitator. And what I'm doing here is I've got the mix knob a little bit below max. I leave the auto on. I have it pushed up a little bit on the brightness here, and just between 3 and 4 on the drive. This is just going to kind of add a little bit of, again, vibe, distortion, dirt to the room. So let's hear what it does. You can definitely hear it bring out a lot more distortion in the hole there. So let's hear it with and without that in the drum mix. You could definitely see how that brings out some more life to the room, which was kind of held in place with that compressor. Now that we've gone over all that, the cymbal bus as a whole has a couple processes on it. Now this first one is something that it's kind of a magic plugin, but it's definitely not something that everyone needs to have. What you would do in place of using this plugin is just find the nastiest notes, the ringing frequencies in the cymbals, and dip them out on an EQ. Soothe is not something I suggest for beginners. It's obviously something that people that have been mixing a while and professionals likely all have at this point. So let's hear what Soothe does to the overheads and the rooms. Now this plugin does introduce a lot of latency, so I wanted to turn it back on while no audio is going through. You see what it's doing is it's dipping out many frequencies all at once, and it's doing so because those frequencies are standing out. You can control all those things with these different nodes. I use this plugin a lot on cymbals. It's mainly the only thing I ever put on there on the cymbal bus. It's good on vocals too. But this plugin I don't suggest to people who are new to mixing because it is very, very easy to overdo it. I'll push this up just so you can hear how much it destroys the sound otherwise. It just completely neuters all of the high end. It removes every bit of the clarity of the cymbals. It's very, very easy to overdo it with Soothe. So I don't recommend it to people who are new. The last thing on the cymbals is some pretty hefty EQ that I do outside of Soothe. And these are spots that, to me, still needed more work. Mainly this 500 hertz and this main high pass here. So let's listen to it with and without. Let me show you what this 500 hertz is doing across the entirety of these drums, or these cymbals. This one is another ringing node. And there's that 3K again, just to reduce some of that ringiness in the cymbals and make them a little easier on the ears. Now, once we tie that in with the kit, everything's going to sound a little more in place again. So this is all of our drums with all of the processing going. Here's the full drum mix again. Actually, this is a good point to show how much this EQ is doing to control the cymbals. This off, you can hear the room is kind of exploding a little more than it needs to. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that off, and let's go ahead and listen with the rest of the mix really quick. So there you have it. That's a good rundown of a full drum mix using just the Periphery 4 drum samples. I think this is a really great kit. It's the first time that I've found that you can get, to me, that full sound without having to add in extra samples. At least for my taste, that is. I like to add in extra samples, as I said before. I think this kit would be especially good for people who want a little bit less of the intensity of Invasion, which had a lot of options to it. A couple things I want to say in closing. Please don't think that you need to go out and buy the plugins that I used in this to get this kind of drum mix. More importantly than anything, you should be using the plugins that you have. Learn what your tools rather than just buying new ones. That being said, the drums here with the Periphery 4 drum kit are expertly recorded. They offer a ton of range, and as you could hear in the beginning, just raw with very little processing, you can get a finished drum sound using just the new Periphery 4 drum kit. So please go to getgooddrums.com and find out more.